Penguin Random House Audio proudly presents The Amen Corner, a play, by James Baldwin, performed by Myra Lucretia Taylor and a full cast, with an author's note and stage directions, read by Dion Graham. For Nina, Ray, Miles, Bird, and Billy. Notes for The Amen Corner. Writing The Amen Corner, I remember as a desperate and even rather irresponsible act. It was certainly considered irresponsible by my agent at that time. She did not wish to discourage me, but it was her duty to let me know that the American theater was not exactly clamoring for plays on obscure aspects of Negro life, especially one written by a virtually unknown author whose principal effort until that time had been one novel. She may sincerely have believed that I had gotten my signals mixed and earnestly explained to me that, with one novel under my belt, it was the magazine world that was open to me, not the world of the theater. I sensibly ought to be pursuing the avenue that was open, especially since I had no money at all. I couldn't explain to her, or to myself, why I wasted so much time on a play. I knew, for one thing, that very few novelists are able to write plays, and I really had no reason to suppose that I could be an exception to this age-old iron rule. I was perfectly aware that it would probably never be produced, and furthermore, I didn't even have any ambition to conquer the theater. To this last point we shall return, for I was being very dishonest, or perhaps merely very cunning, with myself concerning the extent of my ambition. I had written one novel, Go Tell It on the Mountain, and it had taken me a long time, nearly 10 years, to do it. Those 10 years had taken me from Harlem, through the horrors of being a civilian employee, unskilled, of the Army in New Jersey, to being an unskilled employee, period. There was no point in trying to describe the sheer physical terror which was my life in those days, for I was simply grotesquely out of my setting, and everyone around me knew it, and made me pay for it. I say everyone for the sake of convenience, for there were, indeed, exceptions, thank God, and these exceptions helped to save my life and also taught me what I then most bitterly needed to know. That is, that love and compassion, which always arrive in such unexpected packages, have nothing to do with the color of anybody's skin. For I was simply another black boy. There were millions like me at the mercy of the labor market, to say nothing of the labor unions, and it was very clear to me that in the jungle in which I found myself, I had no future at all. My going under was simply a matter of time. But, on the other hand, I had a family, a mother and 8 younger brothers and sisters, and something in me knew that if I were to betray them and the love we bore each other, I would be destroying myself. Yet there was no possibility that I would ever be of any use to them, or anyone else, if I continued my life in factories. I was, unfortunately, not equipped for anything but hard labor. No one would ever look at me and offer me anything more than a menial job, and yet people very frequently hesitated to offer me the only jobs open to me because they obscurely felt that I was unreliable, probably inflammatory, and far more trouble than I could possibly be worth. Well, to tell the truth, I can't say very much about those years. I suppose I blotted it out. What I did, finally, was allow myself to drop to the very bottom of the labor market, became a busboy and short-order cook in places like Rikers, and wrote all the time. And when I was 24, I took the last of a Rosenwald Fellowship grant and bought a plane ticket to Paris. I bought a plane ticket because I was afraid I would lose my nerve if I waited for a boat. I got to Paris with $40 and no French. I slid downhill with impressive speed, which wasn't difficult considering the slightness of my eminence, ended up, successively, in one French hospital and one French jail, and then took stock. I was 25 and didn't have much to show for it. I started again. By 1952, I finished Mountain, borrowed money from Marlon Brando, one of the great and beautiful exceptions referred to above, and came home to try to sell it. I came home in the summertime, and it may have been the emotional climate and the events of that summer which caused me to write The Amen Corner. I had been away for 4 years, For very crucial and definitive years, I myself have described my exile as a self-exile, but it was really far more complex and bitter than that. No one really wishes to leave his homeland. I left because I was driven out, because my homeland would not allow me to grow in the only direction in which I could grow. This is but another way of saying that all my countrymen had been able to offer me during the 24 years that I tried to live here was death, and death, moreover, on their terms. I had been lucky enough to defeat their intention, and physically I had escaped. But I had not escaped myself. I had not escaped my antecedents. Not even France could compensate for some of the things I knew and felt that I was losing. No Frenchman or Frenchwoman could meet me with the speed and fire of some black boys and girls whom I remembered and whom I missed. They did not know enough about me to be able to correct me. It is true that they met me with something else, themselves, in fact, and taught me things I did not know, how to take a deep breath, for example, and corrected me in unexpected and rather painful ways. But it was not really my home. I might live there forever, and it would never be my home. No matter how immensely I might become reconciled to my condition, it was, nevertheless, the specialness of my condition which had driven me to France, and I had to know this. I could not, on pain of death, forget it, or rather to forget it would mean that my high pretensions were nothing but a fraud, that the anguish of my forebears meant nothing to me, and that I had never really intended to become a writer, but had only been trying to be safe. In New York that summer, all this became very vivid to me, as vivid as a wound. And it was I, it seemed to me, who had become a kind of ambulating anguish. Not only had New York not changed, as far as I could see, it had become worse, and my hope of ever being able to live in New York diminished with every hour. And this distress was inconceivably aggravated by the one circumstance which would have seemed to be able to alleviate it. The fact that I was a young writer with a small reputation and a possible future whose first novel was about to be published. But, to tell the truth, I was really a young Negro writer, and the world into which I was moving quite helplessly and quite without malice had its own expectations of me, expectations which I was determined to defeat. The editor assigned to me in my book asked me, when I entered his office for the first time and after the book had been accepted, "What about all that come to Jesus stuff? Don't you think you ought to take it out?" Go Tell It on the Mountain is the study of a Negro evangelist and his family. They do indeed talk in a come to Jesus idiom, but to take it out could only mean that my editor was suggesting that I burn the book. I gagged, literally, and began to sweat, ran to the water cooler, tried to pull myself together, and returned to the office to explain the intention of my novel. I learned a great deal that afternoon, learned, to put it far too briefly, what I was up against. Took the check, and went back to Paris. I went back to Paris, as I then thought, for good, and my reasons this time seemed very different from the reasons which had driven me there in the first place. My original reasons were that I had been forced, most reluctantly, to recognize that thought was also action. What one saw, the point of view from which one viewed the world, dictated what one did. And this meant, in my situation, that I was in danger, most literally, of thinking myself out of existence. I was not expected to know the things I knew, or to say the things I said, to make the kinds of jokes I made, or to do the things I did. I knew that I was a black street boy, and that knowledge was all I had. I could not delude myself about it. I did not even have the rather deadly temptations of being good-looking, for I knew that I was not good-looking. All I had, in a word, was me, and I was forced to insist on this me with all the energy I had. Naturally, I got my head broken. Naturally, people laughed when I said I was going to be a writer, and naturally, since I wanted to live, I finally split the scene. But when I came back to sell my first novel, I realized that I was being corralled into another trap. Now I was a writer, a Negro writer, and I was expected to write diminishing versions of Go Tell It on the Mountain forever, which I refused to do. I had not, after all, paid all those dues for that. I had no idea whether or not I could write a play. But I was absolutely determined that I would not at that moment in my career, not at that moment in my life, attempt another novel. I did not.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?